Hi guys, welcome to Module 2 of Mindset Mastery. To recap on Module 1, we spoke about the very start of the Mindset Mastery journey, and that is through gaining self-awareness. So I really hope that video helped understand a bit more about your own personal story, a little bit about your identity that's been formed over time, and perhaps even some of the self-limiting beliefs that have occurred for you and that you might even still currently have. And let's not forget about the little voice and the destruction and the chaos that it creates when we choose to listen to it. So in Module 2, what we're going to start to look at is how those self-limiting beliefs have evolved and how that started to kind of show up in our behavior. And what we're specifically talking about is self-sabotage. Now, we've all done it. We've all come home after a stressful day and we've got the ice cream out and we've sat down and we've polished through a whole liter of ice cream before we know it. Now, the better question to ask is, why did we do that? Why did we react in such a way that ultimately didn't help us feel any better in the long term? It just helped us feel better in the short term. And that's generally the way that we do self-sabotage. But what we don't realize is that it's part of a much bigger protective coping mechanism that we've developed over a period of time. So in this video, we're specifically going to look at some of the profile types that encase the self-sabotage. And then we're going to specifically look at some of the ways that we do self-sabotage. So if there's a few types of these behaviors that actually you're currently engaging in, you can spot them in action and ultimately start to change them and eliminate them from your life. That's what we want to do. We want to eliminate the things that are ultimately holding us back, because that's going to help us achieve our goals much faster. Now, did you know that there's actually 10 ways that we self-sabotage? And I'm going to run you through these now. So self-sabotage starts with the judge. So that's the all-encompassing behavioral profile and where self-sabotage stems from. Now, when we look at self-sabotage, it's actually a form of self-judgment that's going on. And this comes from the judge, which is one of the 10 self-saboteur profiles. Now, the other 9 are here and they're listed. And this work has to be credited to Dr. Shirzad Chamine. Now, he's a Stanford professor. He's had over 30 years researching human psychology, and he developed this system. Now, I came across this in 2017 and it had a transformational impact on my life and also my client's life. And he actually has an assessment which you guys will be doing at the end of this video. So the other 9 profiles are the stickler, pleaser, avoider, hyperachiever, hyper-rational, hyper-vigilant, the victim, controller, and restless. Now, for each of these different types of profiles, there's a specific type of behavior. So the stickler is basically like perfectionism. The pleaser is giving attention or affection to people in order to kind of get their acceptance or to earn their love. Avoider is just avoiding conflict altogether. And then the hyperachiever. So people that maybe didn't receive praise growing up are really wired to achieve, to obviously garner their own self-worth. Then we have the hyper-rational, which are very cautious or actually over-cautious people. Hyper-vigilant is very hyper-aware, like always feeling that danger might be present. And this is often linked to people who have suffered trauma or abuse in their childhood. The victim mindset, which is everything is happening to me and blaming the outside circumstances. Controller is often associated with people who have experienced abuse or pain or neglect, so that they control their environment so that nothing can hurt them. And the restless is a similar type of patterning to the controller, but they're in constant need for variety and searching for new stimulus because they're constantly getting bored. So these are the different profiles accompanied with the judge. Now, generally, we have the judge plus 3 or 4 of these profiles that really hold us back. Now, on our self-awareness journey, as we dive into this a little bit deeper, this assessment really gets us to understand what these profiles are, and then how we're behaving. Now, simply just from increasing our consciousness on these profiles, we're really able to start to see our self-sabotage in action. And this is very, very powerful. Just knowing it is probably like 80% of actually weakening them and changing them, right? So what we have to understand is that the judge is uniquely and very closely linked to the inner voice. Now, we've learned about how destructive and how damaging the inner voice is. We've also learned that it was there to protect us all along, but it often holds us back from achieving what we want. We also know that it's originated from fear, from some fearful or painful or traumatic circumstance during our developmental stages of life. We've associated a certain trait in fear. Now, what happens is this plays out over a long period of time, and we start to develop these beliefs, right? So that's where it stems from, and this is where it comes from. So let's look at some of the actual behaviors and how that's showing up in our life. Well, we're talking about when we procrastinate, or maybe when we compare ourselves, especially with social media now, it's so easier to compare ourselves. We're talking about just quitting, food binging, laziness and inactivity, just being lazy and not being active is a form of self-sabotage. We're also talking about the feeling of hopelessness and worthlessness, like I could never do this, or I'm incapable of doing such things, so you never start. And then also manipulation. In some of these other profiles, people that are obviously been hurt and have been through trauma or abuse, they do tend to manipulate to try and just control their environment. Now, some of this manipulation could be completely subconscious and they're not even aware of it. Okay, so these are just some of the behaviors, and there's a whole host of behaviors that we engage in when we go through these self-sabotage cycles. But what we have to first do is we have to understand them in greater detail so that then we can start to weaken them from our life. So in the next video, we're actually going to look at how we start to weaken the inner voice in our life. And then specifically, we'll start to work through these profiles and how we can weaken their influence on our life as well. So in summary, when we self-sabotage, what we're actually doing is we're hurting ourselves, but that's because we're actually judging ourselves. Something has happened, something has triggered a response for us to go into a cycle of self-sabotage. Now, these cycles can last, a day, 3 days, a week, a month, and in some cases, years for some people. Now, I'm sure that you know people in your life that have subjected themselves to continuous self-sabotage, and you can't for the life of you understand why they believe certain things about themselves and also behave in certain ways. But this is their identity and their truth in this period of time. And the only way to move past these self-sabotage cycles is to become aware of them. So that's the purpose of this video, and also the purpose of completing this self-sabotage assessment. Now, accompanying this video, there is a link that is taking you directly to Dr. Shirzad Chamin's website, which is positiveintelligence.com, and there is a link there to take the free self-saboteur assessment. Now, I want you to complete that assessment after this video, and then I want you to read the report that you get via email, because that's going to give you really insightful information into the different types of self-saboteur profiles that you may have. It'll also give you a great understanding on why you do certain things. So I want you to really dive into this, and I want you to kind of lean into it and look for the golden nuggets. Remember, as we go through this process, I want you to really remind yourself that there's no judgment. It's just you working through this by yourself. There's nobody else here watching you. It's purely for you to get to a state where you feel better about yourself and where you understand yourself better. And Dr. Shirzad is absolutely world-class with his work, so I highly recommend it. And it's critical that you do complete this assessment because it's kind of the backbone for the next few modules that we're going to work through. So go and complete that assessment now, and I'll see you in module 3, where we're working through weakening the inner voice. And I'll be giving you some strategies that you can deploy to help change the story that's going on inside your mindset right now. I will see you in Module 3.